This story is especially crafted for English learners who are at a B2 to C1 level that's upper intermediate to advanced. And that means if you've been learning English for a while and you're ready for something more natural, more challenging, and more rewarding, then this is exactly the kind of content you need. It's not too slow or basic, and it's not so fast that it leaves you confused. It's balanced, authentic, and built to help you level up. You see, when you're at this stage of learning, you no longer need just grammar drills or simple vocabulary lists. You need exposure to real, life English, the kind that people use in everyday situations, in personal stories, in conversations that actually matter. That's where stories like The Cottage Dream come in. They offer context, they offer emotion, and most importantly, they offer English the way it's spoken naturally. In this story, you'll come across expressions and phrases that advanced speakers use, things like putting down roots, breathe a sigh of relief, or legalities, inheritance, and renovation. These aren't just random words, they're meaningful. They're connected to themes of real life: moving, returning home, starting over, chasing something better, all through the lens of a person who dreams of a peaceful cottage life. And what better way to learn than by connecting those words to emotion and story? You won't just be listening, you'll be experiencing the English language. You'll hear the rhythm of natural British pronunciation. You'll read along with subtitles, and your brain will start to recognize patterns. This is exactly how advanced fluency is built, not from isolated exercises, but from immersion, story immersion. Because let's be honest, reaching B2 or C1 means you've already worked hard. You've probably studied tenses, sentence structures, and vocabulary. But now your goal is not just to know English. Your goal is to use English, to think in it, feel it, and respond without hesitation. That's why this story has been written in a way that doesn't feel like a lesson, it feels like life. You'll follow the emotional journey of someone coming home after a long time abroad, someone trying to build something new, something stable. And while you listen, you'll absorb phrases used during real estate talks, renovation planning, budgeting, personal setbacks, all things you might face yourself one day in English speaking environments. This is the kind of language that textbooks often forget to teach, but it's the language that life uses. And here's the great thing: when you're learning at this level, every word you pick up adds depth to your understanding. It's no longer just about what does this mean. It becomes about how can I use this naturally. That's the shift from intermediate to advanced, and this story is designed to make that shift smoother, more emotional, and more memorable. The character you'll meet in this story is on a journey, and in many ways you'll feel like you're walking beside her. You'll hear her doubts, her excitement, her confusion, and her determination, and through that you'll learn English that's tied to real feelings. Not robotic dialogues, not artificial examples, but real living language. Also, don't worry if you don't understand every single word the first time. That's actually a good thing. It means your brain is stretching, reaching, learning how to deal with language in a natural way. That's how native speakers learn, and that's how advanced learners grow. You're not just memorizing anymore, you're adapting. Use the subtitles if you need to. Pause, rewind, repeat sections that challenge you. The more you engage, the more you'll gain. Each sentence is an opportunity not just to understand, but to feel the language. And as the story progresses, you'll begin to notice that words you didn't know at the start will begin to make sense on their own, simply because you've seen them in context. That's the power of stories like this. They do more than teach. They transform how you think in English. So if you're aiming for fluency, confidence, and natural expression, this is your space. This is where language becomes real. When we talk about learning real English, We don't just mean the kind found in grammar books or classroom exercises. We mean the kind of English you actually hear when people talk about their daily lives, the conversations that happen in cafes, in living rooms, at estate offices, or during a walk through the village. That's what makes this story so powerful. It's not just about vocabulary for tests, it's about language for life. In The Cottage Dream, you're invited into a very real, very British experience. You'll hear the language that's used when someone is trying to settle back into their home country. There's talk of property, renovation, budgeting, legal documents, neighbors, expectations, and it's all wrapped in expressions that British people use without even thinking twice. Things like to put down roots, or this place is a bit overgrown, or even something as casual as not quite what I pictured. These may sound simple, but they're powerful pieces of real, everyday communication. The beauty of this kind of English is that it's not textbook perfect, and that's a good thing. It has rhythm, color, even a bit of emotion behind it. It's not mechanical, it's human. That's what makes it useful, because in real life, English doesn't come in neatly labeled boxes. It comes in stories, in problems, in dreams, just like Rita's. And when you connect vocabulary to those human moments, you remember it better, you feel the language, not just understand it. Let's say you come across a phrase in the story like legalities to sort out. That's not something you'll usually find in beginner-level materials, but it's something you'll definitely hear if someone is buying property, changing their status, or dealing with a contract. And when you hear it in this context in a story where it actually matters, you learn how to use it, not just what it means. That's the shift you want. That's what takes your English from being studied to being lived. The same goes for expressions like substantial cost, or breathe a sigh of relief, or even idioms like beggars can't be choosers. These are the kinds of things that native speakers throw into conversation all the time, not because they're trying to sound fancy, but because it's just how people talk. And the more you're exposed to it in a natural setting like this story, the more it becomes a part of your own voice. And yes, the vocabulary here is slightly more advanced, but that's the point. If you're learning at a B2 or C1 level, you don't want baby steps anymore. You want to be challenged, but not in a frustrating way, in a meaningful way. That's what this kind of story gives you. You're not just learning words, you're learning how people use those words in real life, in decision making, in disappointment, in hope, in negotiation. And that's what builds fluency, not isolated definitions, but real situations. As the story continues, notice how natural the dialogues sound. They're not formal, they're not robotic. They're the kind of conversations you'd overhear in the countryside or hear between family members making plans. It's everyday British English delivered through emotion, challenge, and small wins. And because you're emotionally invested in the story, those words stick. You're not just learning a phrase like to breathe a sigh of relief, you're feeling the moment it happens. Even small details like describing a cottage as homely or a garden as wild and overgrown give you a glimpse into how the British use descriptive language. It's not just vocabulary, it's culture, it's imagery, it's understanding how English paints a picture with just a few words. And when you can do that, when you can see the words and feel the meaning, you're not just a learner anymore, you're a communicator. So don't just watch the story, listen to it closely, let the words sink in, let the context show you how vocabulary works in real life. because these are the moments that will stay with you, the ones where you understand not just what's being said, but why it's being said that way. And little by little, your own English will begin to sound more natural, more expressive, and more alive. That's when you know it's working, when the language in the story begins to feel like your own. One of the most powerful ways to learn any language, and especially English, is through story. Not through long grammar lectures or vocabulary drills, but through storytelling that pulls you in and makes you feel something. Because when you're emotionally connected to what you're hearing, your brain remembers it differently. It's not just information anymore. It becomes experience. That's why this story is more than just a lesson. It's a journey, and as you follow it, you'll start to absorb the language in the same way a native speaker does, not word by word, but moment by moment. You'll hear the rhythm of English in real conversations. You'll sense when to use a phrase based on how it feels, not just where it fits in a textbook. And that's what makes your learning deeper, more natural, and more human. This particular story about a woman returning to her home country, searching for a peaceful life in a traditional British cottage, is emotional, but also realistic. There's joy, frustration, surprise, and struggle. And with each part of her journey, you'll be learning the kind of English that comes with meaning. Not just the word renovation on a list, but renovation as an experience. Not just budget as a definition, but budgeting as a challenge that affects someone's decisions, emotions, and daily life. When language is tied to emotion, your brain remembers it better. You don't just learn that to put down roots means to settle somewhere. You feel what it means when someone finally finds a place that feels like home. You don't just hear plethora and move on. You understand it in context. When someone walks into a cottage and sees a plethora of things that need fixing, the words begin to carry real emotional weight, and that's when you stop memorizing and start internalizing. Story-based learning gives you that chance to connect, to imagine, to step into someone else's shoes while picking up natural language along the way. And the beauty of this method is that you often don't even realize how much you're learning until it's over. Suddenly, phrases come to mind more easily. You start recognizing sentence patterns without having to translate. Your understanding becomes faster and your responses more confident. That's the effect of emotional, story-driven learning. It doesn't just teach, it transforms. And what's special about this kind of story is that it mirrors real life. It's not a fairy tale. It's about someone making tough decisions, about starting over, about facing uncertainty but moving forward anyway. And when you listen to that, when you relate to that, you're not just practicing listening skills. You're building empathy, you're connecting emotionally, and that's what makes the language real to you. You might find yourself smiling when something goes right for her, or feeling frustrated when something falls apart. That emotional connection is your learning partner. It's what makes vocabulary stick and grammar rules fade into the background, because you're not focused on structure, you're focused on meaning. And that's the kind of learning that lasts. As the story unfolds, you'll notice how the English being used reflects the situation. It becomes softer in quiet moments, quicker in moments of stress, and more descriptive when something important is happening. That's how language works in life. It adapts, it reacts, and when you learn through stories, you begin to understand those shifts, not just intellectually, but instinctively. And that's the goal, not just to speak correctly, but to speak naturally. To understand English in motion, not paused, not explained, but lived. That's what this story gives you, a living example of how English expresses real emotion, solves problems, carries dreams, and helps people through change. So, as you listen, let yourself feel the story. Don't rush through it. Let each scene settle, picture it, react to it. and let the English come to you not as something to study, but as something to live with, something to feel, something to grow into. Because the truth is, the most powerful learning doesn't always feel like learning. It feels like feeling, and that's what makes it unforgettable. When you're learning English, one of the biggest challenges isn't just vocabulary or grammar, it's listening. It's the ability to truly hear the language, to follow the pace, to catch the rhythm, the stress, the emotion in someone's voice. And reading, that's where the details live, the connection between the sound and the words. And when both come together, sound and text learning becomes something much more powerful. In this story, you're given exactly that. Every line spoken is supported by clear, accurate subtitles, and the English you're hearing. It's spoken in a calm, natural, British accent, the kind you would hear in real conversation, not in fast, messy speech, and not in overly slow, robotic delivery. Just authentic, understandable, human English. The kind that helps you truly feel the language. Why is that important? Because when you're listening to natural speech, especially with a consistent accent, your brain starts to adjust. It starts tuning in to how certain words are pronounced, how they flow into each other, where the voice rises and falls. That's what real understanding is. Not just translating every word in your head, but hearing it, feeling it, knowing what it means, even before you break it apart. And the subtitles are there to support that process. They're not a distraction, they're a tool. They help you match what you hear with what you see. When a sentence is spoken and you see it written at the same time, your brain forms stronger connections. It's no longer just I heard this sound or I read this word. It becomes I understand how it looks, sounds, and works all at once. Think of it like learning music. Listening is hearing the melody. Reading is seeing the sheet music. But when you put them together, you don't just learn the song, you become fluent in it. And that's exactly what happens here in this story. You're not just following along. You're training your ears and your eyes at the same time to recognize how English naturally flows. And the beauty of a British accent is that it carries a unique rhythm. It's crisp, clear, slightly formal, and deeply expressive. Every word is pronounced with care. Every sentence carries a tone, whether it's hopeful, worried, relaxed, or determined. That gives you more than pronunciation, it gives you feeling. And when language carries feeling, it becomes easier to remember, easier to speak, and easier to use in your own voice. For example, when a character says something like, "I breathed a sigh of relief," you don't just hear the words. You hear the pause before it, you feel the release in her voice, the rhythm slows down, the tone softens. You understand the meaning not just with your mind, but with your ears and your heart. That's real language learning. Not robotic, not flat, but emotional, natural, alive. And the subtitles aren't just helpful for words you don't know, they're powerful even for words you do know. They reinforce spelling. They show you punctuation. They let you see the full structure of a sentence, where it begins, where it pauses, and how it ends. That helps you write better, speak better, and understand faster. Even advanced learners benefit from reading while listening because it strengthens both skills at the same time. You'll notice that as you go deeper into the story, you'll rely less and less on the subtitles. Your ears will start to catch full phrases. You'll start predicting what's being said. You'll feel more confident, more aware of the details. And when you do check the subtitles, it won't be because you're lost, it'll be because you're confirming what you already understood. That's progress, that's growth. That's what this kind of practice gives you. And here's the most encouraging part, all of this happens naturally. You don't need to force it. You don't need to memorize rules while watching. Just be present, listen with intention, read with care, and let the story carry you. The more you engage with it, the stronger your skills become without even realizing how much you're improving. So as you move through this story, let every word guide you through sound, through sight, and through emotion. Because when you train your ears and eyes together, that's when English starts to live inside you. One of the most noticeable things you'll find as you listen to this story is how it gently introduces you to richer, more expressive vocabulary. Not forced, not technical, just real, useful words that describe everyday experiences with depth and emotion. Words that make your English more natural, more detailed, more alive. Take a word like inheritance. In this story, it's not just thrown into a sentence. It means something. It's tied to family, to legacy, to the question of what gets passed down not only in terms of money or property, but in feelings, responsibility, and even regret. When you hear that word used in the context of a person who's received something from a loved one who's no longer here, it sticks. You don't just learn the meaning, you feel the weight of it, and that feeling makes the word unforgettable. Then there's renovation, a word that's useful in so many real-life situations. But here it goes beyond construction or repairs. It's about rebuilding a life. It's about transforming something old into something new. A house, yes, but also a mindset. When a character walks through a dusty hallway or peels back old wallpaper, you're not just hearing about home improvement. You're hearing about effort, change, decision making. And that's when a word like renovation turns into more than just vocabulary. It becomes part of a story you understand with your heart. And overwhelming, that's not a word you use lightly. It carries intensity. Pressure, the kind of emotional flood that comes when everything feels like too much. In this story, when the character stands in front of her new home, realizing how much needs to be done, the word overwhelming doesn't just describe the scene. It is the scene. It brings you into that moment, into her eyes, her breath, her thoughts. That's what makes advanced vocabulary powerful, not just how complex it sounds, but how accurately it reflects real emotion. These kinds of words and many more throughout the story are what elevate your English. They help you move past the basics and into expression. Instead of saying, "I'm tired," maybe one day you'll say, "I feel drained." Instead of saying, "It's too much," you'll be able to say, "It's overwhelming." That's not just more advanced, it's more exact. And the more exact your English is, the more confident you'll feel when speaking, writing, or even thinking. And what's amazing is that you don't need to memorize long vocabulary lists to learn these words. You just need to hear them in the right place. When vocabulary is used in context, when it's linked to a character's feelings or a real decision, you learn without even trying. That's the magic of learning through stories. The words don't feel like homework, they feel like discovery. This story is filled with opportunities like that. You'll hear phrases like putting down a deposit, legalities to sort out, or budget constraints. And while those might sound formal in a textbook, they feel completely natural here, because they're connected to real decisions: buying a home, signing papers, facing limitations. It's all part of life, and life uses words. When you learn those words in stories, you don't just understand what they mean. You understand when to use them and why. You'll also notice how the story balances simple language with these stronger words. That's important, because good English isn't about sounding complicated, it's about being clear, accurate, and honest. Advanced words are tools. You don't need all of them all the time, but when you have them, you can express yourself more precisely. You can describe your emotions better. You can tell your own story with more color. And that's the point. This vocabulary isn't just here to impress. It's here to empower you, to give you the tools to say exactly what you mean. Whether you're writing an essay, having a deep conversation, or just thinking through your own emotions, these words will help you do that with more freedom and control. So as you listen, let the vocabulary come to you naturally. Don't worry about remembering everything on the first try. Just notice the words, feel how they're used, and slowly they'll become part of your voice too. Because when words connect to meaning and meaning connects to emotion, that's when real learning happens. Sometimes the most meaningful stories are the ones that remind us what it means to start over. Not just to change location or routine, but to truly rebuild from the inside out. That's what makes this story so powerful. At its heart, it's about a dream. Not a perfect dream, not one that comes easy, but one that takes courage, patience, and the willingness to take risks when the future feels uncertain. There's something incredibly relatable about wanting a fresh start. Whether it's moving to a new place, changing your lifestyle, or simply imagining a different kind of life, it's a feeling many people know well. And in this story, that desire is captured so clearly. You follow someone who has come home after years away, not just carrying memories from another country, but carrying the hope that maybe, just maybe, she can finally build the life she imagined. She isn't starting from nothing, but it doesn't feel like much either. A small inheritance, a distant dream of owning a peaceful British cottage, and a heart full of uncertainty. That's where it begins, not with excitement, but with doubt, and that's important. Because dreams aren't always shiny and perfect from the start. They're often messy, uncomfortable, even scary. But that's what makes chasing them so brave. As the story unfolds, you see how one small step leads to another, viewing the property, imagining what it could become, looking past the cracks, the dust, the worn furniture, and instead seeing potential. Isn't that what building a new life is all about? Seeing past what's wrong and focusing on what could be right. It's not easy. It never is, but it's real, and that makes it worth telling. What's especially inspiring about this story is that it doesn't avoid the hard parts. It doesn't pretend the journey is smooth. There are legal hurdles, financial stress, and the emotional weight of taking on something bigger than expected. And that's where motivation truly lies, not in the perfect ending, but in the quiet moments where someone chooses to keep going, even when they don't feel ready. That's the lesson. You don't need to be perfect to begin. You just need to believe that where you are isn't where you have to stay. The language used in this story supports that emotion. Phrases like putting down roots, starting from scratch, facing the unknown. They aren't just expressions. They're part of the journey. They reflect the mindset of someone who knows that building a dream takes more than hope, it takes work. And through that vocabulary, you not only improve your English, but also connect with the deeper meaning of what's being said. There's a moment in the story when she stands in the middle of her new but very old home, and she feels completely overwhelmed. That moment is real, it's raw, and it's exactly what many people experience when they take that leap into a new life. You begin to question yourself. You wonder if you've made a mistake. You wonder if you're strong enough. But then something small happens. A window lets in the light. A piece of furniture sparks a memory. A neighbor offers a smile, and suddenly you remember why you started. These are the turning points that make a motivational story different from just a plot. They don't just entertain you, they move you. They challenge you to reflect on your own goals, your own fears, and your own path forward. And in this story, each challenge overcome is a reminder that progress doesn't come all at once. It comes slowly in quiet victories. Fixing one thing, solving one problem, finding peace in one small room at a time. By the time you reach the end of the story, the house isn't perfect, but it's hers, and more than that, it's a symbol. A symbol of effort, of belief, of starting again when it would have been easier to walk away. And that's the true message, that no matter where you've been or what you've lost, there's always a way to build something new. It might not look like what you imagined at first. It might take longer than expected, but it will be yours, and that makes every moment of struggle worth it. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a story can do is remind you that you're allowed to begin again,